The auction hall smelled of expensive cologne and desperation. Claire stood on the platform, blindfolded, leather cuffs biting into her wrists and ankles. Around her, silence. The kind that made her skin crawl. A silent auction, they'd called it. Bidders raising numbered paddles while a moderator's voice droned on about her qualities. She thought of her mother, dead now, 4 years in the ground. Lucky, Claire thought bitterly. Lucky to be beyond this humiliation, beyond the crushing weight of her father's weakness. He'd gambled away our home, our savings, her childhood. She shouldn't have been surprised to see his signature on that document the goons had shoved in her face that morning. Collateral, they'd called her. The bidding seemed to last forever, numbers climbing, her value calculated in increments of depravity. When the gavel finally fell, Claire felt nothing. Numbness had become her most reliable companion. They kept her in a holding room that night. The next morning, she was transported to a mansion that sprawled like a monument to wealth and power. Guards escorted her to a bedroom, beautiful, pristine, and utterly a cage. A staff member brought meals. No one spoke to her. No one explained. She woke that first night to find him sitting in the chair by the window, watching her. Fear jolted through her, sharp and immediate. Then her eyes adjusted to the darkness, found the lines of his face, and recognition slammed into her like a freight train. Damien? His knuckles were bloody. His jaw was set. His eyes, those eyes she'd once loved, were cold as winter stone. The fear returned, worse than before. This wasn't a Damien who'd brought her flowers and called her his twinkle because her eyes reminded him of stars. This was someone else, someone dangerous. He stood without a word and walked out, locking the door behind him. Morning brought a dress, emerald green, the color he used to say she looked best in. A staff member asked her to join the master for breakfast. Master. The word tasted like ash. Downstairs, the dining room was obscenely elegant. Damien sat at the head of a table meant for 12, eating in silence. Claire took the seat across from him, her hands trembling in her lap. He didn't look at her, didn't speak. The only sounds was silverware against porcelain and her own thundering heartbeat. When he stood to leave, something inside her snapped. "What are you going to do to me?" He paused, his back to her. When he turned, his smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Wouldn't you love to know?" To the guard stationed by the door, he said, "I do not want what's mine going missing again." What's mine? The words were a brand, searing and possessive. Then he was gone, and Claire was alone with the terrible understanding that she was trapped in a house with the man whose heart she'd broken and whose money she'd stolen. The man who was now a mafia boss with blood on his hands and ice in his eyes. Days blurred together, breakfast in silence, empty hours, guards at every exit. At night, she lay awake, wondering when the other shoe would drop. It happened a week later. He came home after midnight, his shirt torn, his face bruised, blood seeping through the fabric at his ribs. He woke her without ceremony, his voice flat. "I need you to stitch this." Muscle memory took over. How many times had she done this for her father? Cleaned wounds, threaded needles, pretended everything was fine while her hands shook with suppressed rage. Damien sat on the edge of her bed, stripped to the waist, and said nothing while she worked. His skin was warm under her fingers. Familiar. She remembered tracing these shoulders, kissing this collarbone, laughing against this chest. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "Practice." Her voice was hoarse. His hand caught her wrist, gentle despite the violence carved into his knuckles. "Claire." She looked up. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were burning. The kiss happened like a storm breaking, inevitable, destructive, desperately needed. Old hunger roared to life between them. 4 years of absence collapsing into frantic hands and breathless gasps. They fell into each other like drowning people grasping for air, and for a few hours, the past dissolved. When she woke the next morning, he was gone. It became a pattern. Silent breakfasts, him disappearing for the day. At night, he'd slip into her bed while she slept, curl around her like he used to, and leave before dawn. She woke cold every morning, the ghost of his warmth mocking her. "He's using what he owns," she told herself. He missed her body, that's all. This was revenge, taking what he wanted because he could. But revenge didn't explain the tenderness in his touch when he thought she was asleep. It didn't explain the way he held her like she was something precious instead of something stolen. The fever came suddenly. One morning she couldn't get out of bed, her body burning, her thoughts scattered and strange. Damien's personal physician came and went. Then Damien stayed. Through the haze of fever, she felt him, cool cloths on her forehead, water pressed to her lips, his voice low and soothing when nightmares clawed at her. Once, delirious, she thought she heard him say, "Don't leave me again, Twinkle, please." When the fever finally broke, she woke to find him asleep in the chair beside her bed. His head was tilted back at an uncomfortable angle, exhaustion written in every line of his body. He'd stayed. All night, he'd stayed. And there, visible where his shirt had fallen open, was the ring. She'd seen it before, that first night they'd crashed together in desperate need. But she'd been too overwhelmed to process it then. Now, in the gray morning light, she could see it clearly. A simple platinum band on a chain. She leaned closer, her breath catching. Inside the ring, engraved in delicate script, "Forever my Twinkle." The sob caught in her throat. He'd kept it. For 4 years, he'd worn the ring he'd meant to give her against his heart. The pet name he'd called her, the promise he'd wanted to make, he'd carried it all this time. Claire. His voice was rough from sleep. She looked up to find him watching her, and for the first time since that night in the auction hall, his guard was completely down. He looked exhausted, worried, heartbreakingly young. "You kept it," she whispered. His hand moved to cover the ring, protective. Then he stopped, let his hand fall. "I couldn't," he swallowed hard. "I couldn't let you go." "Damien, Why did you leave?" The question was raw, scraped from somewhere deep. "I would have given you anything, everything. Why did you take the money and run?" The tears came then, hot and fast. "My mother, she needed surgery, and my father had gambled away everything. I was desperate. I knew you had money. I just—" Her voice cracked. "I was going to pay you back. I was going to explain. But then she died anyway, and I'd stolen from you for nothing. And I was so angry, ashamed, scared. I couldn't bring myself to face you." He stared at her. "I betrayed you because I had no choice. and I've hated myself for it every day since." The silence stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then Damien moved. He pulled her into his arms, and Claire shattered against his chest. He held her while she sobbed, for her mother, for the years lost, for the love she'd destroyed trying to save someone who died anyway. "I saw you," he said against her hair. "I tracked you down, and I saw you standing there, and I couldn't hurt you more." She looked at him, finally summoning courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why did you buy me?" "Because I couldn't let anyone else have you. I wanted to hate you, but I couldn't. Because you're mine, Claire. You've always been mine." "The money. I don't care about the money. I never did. I cared that you left without saying goodbye." She pulled back to look at him. His face was wet too, she realized. "I'm sorry. God, Damien, I'm so sorry." "I know." He cupped her face in his hands. "I know." They didn't fix everything that day. Trusts shattered so completely couldn't be rebuilt in a single conversation. But something shifted. He stopped leaving before dawn. She stopped flinching when he entered a room. They talked for hours every night about her mother's illness, about his rise in the organization, about the ways they'd both been broken and badly mended. The guards at the doors disappeared. He took her into the city, showed her the legitimate businesses he'd built alongside the darker empire. She told him about the years after she'd left, the jobs she'd worked, the guilt that had eaten her alive. One night, he found her in the library, curled up with a book. He sat beside her without asking, and she leaned into him without thinking. It felt easy, natural, like coming home. "What are we doing?" she asked softly. "I don't know." His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. "Does it matter?" "No, I guess it doesn't." They sat together enjoying the present. Two people who'd loved and lost and found each other again, settling into something warm and undefined. They existed in the spaces between. Not quite what they'd been, not yet what they'd become. But every night he slept beside her, and every morning she woke to find him still there, the ring around his neck catching the light. Forever might twinkle. Maybe forever could start again.